There's a version of success that looks great on paper, but it does indeed cost you everything that matters. The health that starts slipping, the family get togethers that you keep missing, and the version of yourself that only seems to show up on the weekends when kind of the emails slow down for you. And for a lot of people who are listening to this, I think building that kind of success right now is tough, and some of them are starting to wonder if there's another way. Tonight's guest is building something real, and he has made a decision that the scoreboard at work will never come at the expense of the people at home. Welcome back to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm your host, Sayan, and I'm really glad that you're here. My guest today is Hadley Nightingale, founder and CEO of New Zealand Property Buyers, a buyers agency managing over 160 properties, leading a remote team, and building something that genuinely helps families create financial freedom. He's also a dad of two and someone who has made a clear and deliberate decision that business success means nothing if your health and your family suffers for it. So, Hadley, welcome to the show. I think really glad to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it, saying, and looking forward to seeing what we uncover this morning or today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Hadley, before we get into kind of the mindset that really is required to actually tap into this kind of work. Before we get into that big stuff, I want to start with your story because I think you have had the journey, farm work in New Zealand, it is in the mining and transport industry in Australia, and then coming back home and building a property business from the ground up. So when you look back at that um, hustle arc, like what do you think that earlier chapter, that physical and demanding outdoor work that actually built in you, that still shows up in how you live today?
Yeah, I think the big thing with the outdoor work, the farming, the isolation, really builds resilience. And I don't think that you can get that without pressure, without stress, without being put into situations where you have to think for yourself, you have to make your own decisions. And without that, and if you have an easy run, if it catches up to you later in life, you're having to do a whole lot of backpedaling and go back and learn from stuff that you could have learned earlier on in your journey.
Yeah, I think I agree because I think what those demanding spots do for you is that it really pushes you to that limit and makes your brain, and it's not just about the mind, it's about the body itself, right? Being in that, I would say, hustle mood. And then I think as you age, as you slow things down, you start to actually see that as something like the foundation, right? Something that you could build up from there. So, Ellie, you manage 160 plus stores right now, and you lead a remote team and work with clients across New Zealand and Australia, and not to mention, you're also a dad of two, and I think that's again different from the initial journey that you had. But I think that's still a lot of plates spinning at once. So I think a lot of people in that position quietly normalize the stress, and they just absorb and keep going. So, what really made you decide early on that you weren't going to the pressure of growing a business that just become the background, of your life?
In terms of making the decision, I don't suppose it was a decision that I set out initially to grow like we have and but become what we have. My initial sort of thought was is that if I can start one business, or if I can just get out of the 9 to 5 job, if I can dictate when I want to go to lunch, if I need to go to my daughter's school assembly, I can go to that. I don't have to apply for leave. And that was the initial sort of thought process behind it. But what we've found over time is that as when it's just you operating, as soon as you stop, your sales stop. As soon as you stop, your marketing stops. As soon as you stop, your delivery stops. And I suppose you get yourself to a situation where you go, well, I can either leave it as just me, uh, or I'm going to have to grow this. But there's like a pain point between $300,000, which you can probably do by yourself with one person, to like $1 million. And because when you get to the million mark, you've had to employ a couple of people, but if any one of them leaves, you've got a gaping hole. And so it then becomes a thing of, well, from a risk management perspective, is that you either sit there with at $1 million with two or three people that work for you. If one of them leaves, you're in a world of pain. Or you've got to go, right, I've got to push to the next level so that if one leaves, I've got someone else to slot in there. So it wasn't necessarily the initial objective. It's just sort of how it's panned out. There's always been a whole lot of ambition to do a whole lot, but I was probably naive in the start to think that, I could do, huge or large revenue with, just myself and one other person in the industry that we're in.
Yeah, I mean, there's something fundamental that you really said, and I think that part really resonated with me. Um, and if I had to rephrase that, you could either work a 9 to 5 under a boss, but then um, I would say maybe not be as much accountable as running a business. And I totally understand, Headley, where we're heading from here. I mean, you could make that decision to yourself, right? Would you rather not have a boss and be able to dictate things on your own? But also that implies that more responsibility and making yourself more accountable. And I think that is the kind of uh pressure or stress level that initially, I would say, this is something that a lot of us don't really account for when they're starting off on a new journey. So you mentioned that being present at home is is almost like non-negotiable for you. And that word non-negotiable is interesting because most things in businesses are negotiable by nature. So actually protect that boundary when business has its own demands and its own urgent moments and pace.
Yeah, it's something that I do and that I, continually attempt to get better at. I'm by no way a master of it. But I think the big part of it is delegating things like emails, using your calendar to block out those times. If you've got, lunch with your wife or your partner or significant other, that's blocked out in there, and you can actually physically see when that time is, because if it's in your calendar, it's a priority. If it's a case of, well, hey, look, my family's important to me, well, where do they show up in the calendar? Where's it showing you that you're going to your daughter's gymnastics at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon or wherever that might be? And I think that's the cases that becomes really easy to put business, 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 and nothing on the family side. But you've really got to weigh up where that priority is. If it goes in the calendar, then it's got to be done. And you haven't got the excuse of, oh, someone else has booked a meeting over that time, so now for I can't do it. Put the important family stuff in there, and then build the rest of the week around what that looks like.
Yeah, and Ellie, may I ask, what does being present at home actually look like for you on a regular, weekday? What would you
Uh,
say?
yeah. So in terms of that side of things, is basically putting the phone down and not having it swing off your arm. As I say, it's something that I'm getting better at. I'm by no means the expert at saying every night when I get home, uh, you know, like the last night, for example, my wife went to bed early. She wasn't feeling well, so I went back to work. But it's more so about on those times that your family are there, that you're not sitting in front of the computer, that you're not sitting there on your phone, that you're there with them. And then most things can be sorted out the next day. I mean, unless something's on fire and the house is burning down, nothing bad's going to happen by you not responding to an email at that very second or at that very minute. And most people are pretty understanding. Like, hey, look, I can't talk about with my family. They're
Absolutely.
normally a pretty unreasonable person to go, well, no, you need to answer my phone call.
Absolutely right. That is something that I think most of us, make up scenarios in our head because I think what you're really pointing to is something that a lot of people will overanalyze or even skip over. That presence is not just physically being in a room, it's whether the work followed you in through the door, and building a routine that really keeps those two worlds generally separate rather than just technically separate. It's having this own kind of discipline, like you mentioned, and obviously there comes calendar management as well, like you said, knowing which things you could delegate, and I mean, looking at it from the lens of, okay, so these are the things that I need to take on, because if I don't, then there's literally, it's going to affect your business. And then you look at things that you think you could delegate to someone, and then you do that. And then there are things that you think you could put it, I would say, I'm gonna put it this way, that you could really put to the bin, right? So that's something that's not important for you. So, having that kind of clarity is also something which is very fundamental, Hadley, when one is trying to really make boundaries and make room for himself or herself. So, one question, just out of curiosity. So, what does that calendar management really looks like? So, curious to know if there are any specifics in your mind that you or a framework that you have been using from the start when you were, say, building this business. So, anything that helped you get better with time management.
Yeah, I think most people tend to think that the business that they're in or the area that they're in is so specialized and no one else has ever done, or no one else can do what they do. And and it's a common thing, right? When you talk to people, oh, I'm different, I'm special, my business is different, no one could do what I do, and it's just a fallacy. Um,
Yeah.
so one of the biggest things that I've done, one of the best hires I've made is with an executive assistant, and she looks after my calendar, she looks after my email, she looks after all of those type of things that are admin heavy. And it's one of the traps for business owners, or when you're starting out, is that you want to do everything yourself. You go and you hire a sales person or a marketing team or someone like that, and you've got to pay them. We'll talk in New Zealand dollars. You pay them 60,000, 70,000, $80,000 New Zealand to do the sales, to do the marketing, to do the delivery, but you're still doing the $25 an hour. You're still doing the $50,000 a year job, and it's upside down. You should be starting at the bottom of the replacement ladder and getting someone to take off those lower end tasks from you first, and then working your way up the ladder, as opposed to doing what a lot of people do: go and get the salesperson, go and get the marketing person. But because they then haven't got the time to go and put the systems and processes in place, they then can't work out why the salesperson isn't performing, why the marketing person isn't performing, because they just haven't got the base for them. So it's about replacing your time as you go, getting a really solid base there for someone that can take off the mundane tasks from you. But the other thing with the inbox too is that
Mhm.
your inbox also tends to be everyone else's to-do list for you. So if you're in there all the time and you're sitting there and you're looking, you're like, right, I need to go and get this presentation sorted for next week. You open your inbox and Sally's just emailed you to say, hey, urgently, can you do this for me? Go, oh, jeepers, okay, I better go and do this thing for Sally. And the presentation that you're going to make to 100 people gets put off for another 5 hours, or it gets pushed further down the line. And then Jim emails you and he asks you to do something else. And so if you've got someone else that looks after that for you, then the your ability to focus on what you need to do, and your timing gets dictated by your EA, who can put the things in your calendar, then that's how you get ahead, not employing someone to do the sales, and your time's getting dictated to by everyone else. Because generally speaking, you're going to be the best salesperson for your product, especially when you start, because you're not going to be able to get the top salesperson,
Yeah.
but you are going to be able to get a very good EA to look after the side of things that they need to look after.
Wow, that's a solid piece of advice, I think, for a lot of listeners listening to this right now. Because that is something that I think a lot of leaders they do talk about their um morning routines and their habits, but often do they really share what really happens when the system breaks down for a week, or uh, what happens if they go missing for a week for whatever reason, right? It could be something overwhelming or drastic, let's say. But by the way, the way you really reframe that, Headley, I think that is what I feel. That is where discipline and having this clear vision of the necessities really comes into the picture. And uh, I think on top of that, since you lead a remote team, I think that really adds another layer of all of this. It's a bit nuanced because you can't really walk past someone's desk and read the room. You can't always tell who's struggling. So, uh, Hadley, how do you genuinely connect to the people on your team, and what does that tell you about your own mental well-being and the shape, I mean, the kind of leader that you are to them?
Yeah, this one's probably going to sound so extremely simple, uh, but just treat your remote team like humans, like people, like you would everyone else. Say good morning to them. Find out about their family. If they're struggling with something, they'll open up to you. If you, it's like anyone, right? You treat them like a robot, you're going to get robot responses back. And I think that's really been the key thing, and it's the feedback that we get from the team is like, you guys actually care about us. We've worked for other companies before, and we get a phone call to say, "Oh, look, get fired." And for our team in the Philippines, that's their biggest fear with working with them remotely. Is that and especially when they start with us because not they don't know the company, but it's that thing of like one day I'll just wake up and I won't have a job. So that's sort of the key thing with our team there is like that reassurance, that thing of like, hey, look, uh, you're not just going to wake up tomorrow morning. You're not going to have a job. If there's an issue, we're gonna work through this with you. We're gonna point it out. And if for me, there's always there's two issues. There's either a process and a system problem, and if something goes wrong, it's like where's our system and where's our process. If we haven't got that system and process in place, then it's my issue, and we need to get that sorted out so that the person has the structure that they need. Um, if we've got the structure that we need, then we've got a people problem. And then we need to, and there's either two things there is either we've trained a person on it and they haven't followed it, which we need to give them some more training, or we haven't trained them what they need to do. So therefore, once again, it becomes our problem. But once we've trained them, and then we've got the playbook that they need, and then there's still an issue, then we've got a person problem. We either need to get them trained up or we need to transition them off. And I think that's the thing for us with our remote team is it comes down to a thing of we're very fair. We look after our people really well, but because of the remote nature of it, that once the trust is broken, then that's sort of a hard line. It's often gone. And I think it's probably one of the things that where the business owners struggle is that structure in terms of, and especially for that first hire with the with the EA side of things. And what I can do for your listeners is that if they want a copy of my EA playbook, is just to jump on Instagram and DM me EA at Hadley Nightingale, and I can fire them across a copy of that to give them some insight into the structure of how we go about setting that playbook up. Um, Not only for the EA, but also for our other team members as well.
Perfect, perfect. So we'll have that in the show notes, Italy. And something that you said earlier, I think that's fundamental. You said, it might look simple, but I think that's tricky because, when deadlines and a lot of other pressures are on your shoulders, you might not be in a spot where, you're accounting for all these little things. And that is something that I think a lot of founders and CEOs don't say out really loud is the way you show up internally in your team, and the way that you communicate or, treat your team members. I think internally it has a direct effect on the culture around you, and it just builds that transparency and also accountability. I think it induces that level of accountability in your team as well, which is fundamentally very important. Should you want someone to be there, I mean, throughout your business, and I mean, for whatever they were hired for, and maybe take their skills to the next level by offering them that growth. So I think, Hedley, that might be the best note to wrap this conversation upon. But for anyone who actually resonated with your advices and your story, maybe a founder or a leader or a parent who is achieving a lot, but quietly knows that something important is starting to slip, and wants to connect with you. So besides Instagram, what's the best place for them to find you and read more about your work?
But that is the best place. So at Hadley Nightingale on Instagram is where our content goes up. Best place to DM me and start a conversation there is the best place.
Perfect. So we'll have that in the show notes, folks, for all of you who wants to connect with Hadley Nightingale. And with that, folks, what I myself personally am taking from this conversation is that think of business not just as discipline. It's kind of a life tool, right? And the most important systems that you will ever build aren't the ones that really broke things like your revenue. They are the ones that would protect your relationships and the kind of person that you're still choosing to be when the work is done for the day. So that's what I would like you to all set with for today's conversation. But Hedley, thank you so much for this conversation. I think it has been a reminder that the healthiest business are usually built by the healthiest people and not the relentless ones. So thanks for coming to the show, Hedley. I really appreciate that. And folks, for all of you listening to this right now, if something in today's episode did stay with you, do pass it to someone who might need to hear it. Maybe a leader, maybe a co-worker. And yeah, with that, folks, this has been Cyan on Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. And do subscribe to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, because we do take care of yourself and the people that you're building for. So I'll see you in the next one.